You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Hello and welcome to episode 30 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltInPA.com. I am Walt White, and I have been watching a lot of television as of late. I don't know whether I've mentioned it in the past, but my day job puts me in front of a computer for, 38 of 40 hours a week, or 38 of the 40 hours in a work week, and it allows me to telecommute 2 days a week. I made arrangements with my employer to work from home 2 days a week to cut down on childcare costs back when my daughter was born. And one of the beauties of working from home is that I spend my time in front of a laptop to do my job, and it allows me to just kind of hang out at the dining room table or take my computer into the living room, and it gives me the freedom to turn the TV on and just let something play in the background while I'm working. Well, throughout the week, I've been kind of bored with daytime TV. It's generally the time that I listen to podcasts and things like that, but sometimes it's a little difficult with a 2-year-old or with an almost 2-year-old running around. So I've been sort of holding down in the living room with my laptop and just putting the TV on in the background. My daughter doesn't watch it, and I just need something to break up the laughing and screaming and the sound of toys crashing against one another. And I was getting really sick of daytime TV, so what I decided to do was, instead of trying to listen to a podcast throughout the day, because obviously when you're caring for a child throughout the workday, you really can't invest a ton of time actually listening to what's being said on the podcast. So I started looking for stuff on TV. I have a Netflix subscription, and I started poking around on Netflix, seeing what was available that I could watch on TV sort of in the background. And I came across this show, The Colony. It's on I don't think it's aired anymore. I mean, I haven't seen it in quite a while, but the old reruns are available on Netflix. The first season aired in 2009, the second season aired in 2010, and it is a Discovery Channel television show. It's reality-based, and it's pretty interesting in that there's a group of people which consists of about 10 people, and the network puts them in what they call an experiment. Basically, they take these 10 people and they drop them into a post-apocalyptic environment in which they are totally separate from the world around them. So in the first season, they were dumped into this industrial area, and I think they had 4 or 5 acres fenced off to keep them away from the rest of the world, and they were to survive in this restricted area with little to no contact from the outside world, except for like renegades that would come in every now and again. And it was pretty interesting in that you could draw a comparison between this particular TV show and things like Doomsday Preppers, which I talked about before, because some of the things that they did were sincerely interesting for, those crap hits the fan situations, catastrophes, or just, really bad scenarios. And what I found most interesting was when these people were dumped into this area, this confined area with one another. They have no electricity, they have a very limited supply of food, the clothes that are on their back, and maybe a couple of other little things that they brought in with them, and that's it. And it was really interesting to see them cope with the environment. For instance, in order to generate power to run tools to build their their environment, or to improve upon their environment, they had to utilize car batteries that they were scavenging throughout the area. Well, car batteries die pretty fast when you're running a welder with them. So how do you recharge the batteries? Well, we'll scavenge the alternator from the cars to power the batteries, but how do we turn the alternator? Well, there's a snowblower over here. Let's gut it and see if we can use that to turn the alternator, but we don't have any gas to put in the snowblower, so how do we turn the motor over? Well, let's make a gasifier, and we'll take the gas off of wood and we'll pump it into the intake of the snowblower, and that will in turn turn the alternator, which will power up the batteries. And just seeing all this stuff come together, like you're running a motor off of wood gas. I mean, I've seen television shows that talk about, you know, wood-fired pickup trucks and things like that, and it's always been kind of interesting, but sort of like a long forgotten technology, and seeing these individuals do it was really interesting. Eventually they found solar panels and they upgraded from their wood powered snowblower to charge the batteries, but you know, seeing these different things, you know, made me wonder, you know, how many old skills or you know, old technologies am I not aware of in a really bad situation? Am I going to be able to survive if, you know, there is no electricity and, you know, the world comes to an end, more or less? The second season was pretty interesting. They were the first season they were dropped in a cordoned off area of Los Angeles. The second season they were in Louisiana. And, you know, one of the things to keep these people from dying is they always gave them a power inverter, so they could power household equipment and lights and things like that off of the car batteries. So that was kind of a given. That was sort of a gimme. But the second season, they were, in order to recharge the batteries, at first they were turning the alternator from a scavenged car by way of a tractor. And they didn't have any diesel for the tractor, so they rendered down the fat of a pig to create biodiesel in the tractor, which I didn't know you could do that, but that's pretty cool. When that wasn't enough, they created a turbine, or a windmill, more or less, and they set up this big giant windmill made of fence posts and scavenged bicycle parts, and they used that to turn the alternator to charge the batteries, in which they could use, you know, welders and different things like that. So it was really interesting, and in both scenarios they had to leave the environment and sort of escape into a more sustainable area. In the first season, they used a big box truck, which they powered with wood gas. The second season, they powered like an airboat with a scavenged airplane motor that didn't take typical gasoline. So fortunately, one of the contestants was a home brewer and was able to distill ethyl alcohol to power the motor, and you know, all this stuff was pretty interesting. And you're wondering, well, why are you talking about it on a gun show? But I don't know, to be honest with you. I just thought it was really interesting, and it sort of coincides with those, you know, with people like us, and I say us in quotes, in the gun community, you know, trying to be prepared, having, you know, bug out bags, which I don't, or bug in bags, or get home bags, things like that. Trying to be prepared, and then seeing some of these technologies on TV made me wonder, or made me realize how much I didn't know. And, you know, it was really interesting. And now that I've seen, you know, a motor powered by wood gas, I'm comfortable with the concept of trying it myself. Not that I really have any need to, but, you know, in the memory banks, I have the premise of how this thing works. So seeing these people survive was pretty interesting, and well worth watching if you have Netflix. I don't know that there is going to be a season 3. I started looking it up a little bit, and it seems as though there may be, but it's, you know, it's 2012, and season 2 aired in 2010, so it may be a long gone television show. It wasn't particularly good as far as entertainment value goes. You know, if you're watching it for, you know, the funny outtakes of reality TV, this show didn't have it. It had lots of drama and lots of technology, and from the educational standpoint, I thought it was very good. But from your typical TV entertainment standpoint, I guess I could see why it didn't air again. But speaking of television shows and how much I've been watching as of late, I caught episode 2 of Top Guns recently, and I thought that was pretty good. And the reason why it really caught my eye was they featured 3 guns. the Browning assault rifle, the Steyr AUG, and the FNPS 90. And the entire reason why I got interested in this show or seeing the previews was that I have a friend of mine that just built a FNPS 90, and he actually sent me pictures of it, and he wants me to get up to his house and shoot it. I can't wait. However, this is a friend of mine that I don't see anywhere near as often as I'd like. He's about 2 hours away, so come May, I'm going to be in his general area, and if I get the chance, I'm definitely going to his house, and I'm going to give that gun a try. I can't wait to try it. He also has an FN57, which fires the same 5.7 round, and I'm really interested in giving it a shot. So that's kind of where I'm at as far as the television aspect goes, and just because I've been watching so much of it over the past week. But the last thing I want to talk about before we get into the news is the email. I've gotten a couple of emails as of late, and they've been fantastic. I love getting email. Tips for the show, things like that have been great. I got a pretty good write-up on New York gun laws, which I was going to talk about this show. However, because I just got home from a USPSA stage design seminar, I want to talk about that a little bit, and I'm going to push that article on New York gun law until next week. But I received another email regarding a previous episode where I talked about wanting to stay more or less general firearms instead of being competitive shooting based, and the guy that sent the email, and I forget his name, but he had a pretty good point in that I should try to mix it in as much as possible, because unlike the Power Factor show where they have top level shooters and people that have been in it for a long time, a newer USPSA shooter, or seeing the sport from a newer shooter's perspective leads to some interesting insight. So I think I'm going to mix it in as much as I can, or as much as I feel comfortable, and we're kind of going to go from there because I like the idea. So there is your pre-news rambling session, and I'll be right back with the news. Alright, first up in the news this week comes a piece on eliminating Pennsylvania Instant Check System, yay or nay. And this comes from the Canon Macmillan Patch. And it goes on to say, there's been recent speculation about Governor Tom Corbett proposing cuts to the budget of the Pennsylvania State Police, which should be a blow to the communities relying on the state police for protection. If we are looking at ways to eliminate spending without losing services, perhaps it is time to seriously consider eliminating the Pennsylvania Instant Check System, also known as PICS, which is used to check potential handgun purchasers and is funded through the state police budget. According to information provided by Firearm Owners Against Crime, PICS has caused repeated havoc for licensed firearms dealers and residents in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Problems range from outages during operations and inconsistencies among operators when requesting approvals to include prolonged waiting periods throughout the approval process when the system is busy, especially on weekends. FOAC claims the most worrisome aspect of the system is the position taken by the state police that quote, if the system becomes inoperable, the firearms transfers cease. This means the Second Amendment could effectively cease to exist in the event of mechanical or electronic failure. End quote. Critics maintain the PICS system is slow, costly, inefficient, and redundant. The PICS system is notorious for weekend slowdowns in operation. This becomes especially troublesome for citizens and gun dealers during the holidays or gun show weekends. By comparison, critics maintain the National Instant Check System challenge procedure is well defined and straightforward. PICS errors are distressingly common. These errors arise from a variety of sources. Two names can be identical, Social Security numbers, which PICS continues to use despite a federal court order, can be transposed. Very old court records can be wrong, or the sentence for a crime that was not punishable by more than 1 year in jail when it was committed can be later amended. These problems mean someone who is legally permitted to own a firearm are being denied that right, and the appeals are difficult under the best of circumstances. If a court record or FBI report is incomplete or ambiguous, ambiguous, wow, there's a word that I can't pronounce, authorities in Pennsylvania will presume the worst and leave it to the individual to prove otherwise. I have had constituents personally describe not knowing why a denial was issued until their appeal hearing began, which makes preparation difficult if not impossible. Even a simple technical error cannot be properly disputed if the person appealing doesn't have enough advance notice to obtain the correct information. This is inefficient at best, arguably a potential violation of due process at worst. Another major concern is that there are tens of thousands of gun owners who have been denied the purchase of a firearm and have not appealed, which places them in jeopardy of arrest and prosecution for being a disqualified individual attempting to purchase a firearm. Whether you agree with the Second Amendment or not, the right to own a firearm is well-defined law. If someone is legally entitled to purchase, own, or transfer a gun, they should be afforded every opportunity under the law to do so. If the law claims the person should be deprived of those rights, then every possible bit of due process should be afforded to ensure that deprivation is lawful, legitimate, and supported by documented fact. The PICS process raises questions about these issues that could potentially be solved by switching to the NICS system. We could become more efficient and save money for the Pennsylvania State Police at the same time, which could offset budget cuts and keep more officers in uniform. For all these reasons, the pros and cons eliminating PICS should be part of the debate as the state budget negotiations continue. So it's a pretty interesting article on why Pennsylvania should move away from the Pennsylvania instant check system and use the national system instead, especially in a state where we're constantly fighting balancing the budget, and it was repeatedly late with former Governor Ed Rendell. Tom Corbett seems to be doing a better job with it. However, if they're looking at state police cuts, they should probably be looking at places where there are redundancies. And if we could use the national system to make things easier and could eliminate the Pennsylvania system from the Pennsylvania State Police's budget, I say why not go for it? I mean, I know that the Pennsylvania system is a bit of a hassle. You're not required to put your Social Security number down on the form when you fill out the paperwork to purchase a firearm. However, it is strongly advised, because if you submit the paperwork without your Social Security number, there's bound to be problems with the Pennsylvania InstaCheck system. Because I have a common last name in White, it is not uncommon at all for me to have a long wait for the Pennsylvania InstaCheck system to verify that I'm okay through the gun shop. I get put on wait more often than not. I sort of get put on hold, and a live operator has to come on and verify me, and it's a bit of a hassle, all because I have a common last name. You would think that if you're providing the Social Security number, it should make it all the easier, but for whatever reason, that extra information doesn't. So personally, if the NICS system is better and will save us money, why not go for it? I mean, I'm not crazy about the thought of using a national system for state level firearm purchases, but if it is going to be better and it's not going to be detrimental to gun owners, or if it's not going to be a hindrance to gun owners, then maybe we should really consider it in Pennsylvania. So, interesting little article on the Pennsylvania InstaCheck system. Well, the second item on the news list this week comes from the Seattle Times, and it is entitled, "Woman 20 Dies After Freak Florida Church Shooting." And this is sad. It wasn't a crazy gunman that came into a church and wreaked all kinds of havoc, but it was a negligent discharge. But anyway, it goes on to say, St. Petersburg, Florida. Authorities say a Florida pastor's daughter, who was accidentally shot in the head in a church, died Saturday at a hospital. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office say 20-year-old Hannah Kelly was pronounced dead at about 10:20 a.m. Saturday at Bayfront Medical Center. An autopsy is pending. Kelly had been hospitalized since February 12th when she was struck in the head by a bullet at Grace Connection Church in St. Petersburg, where her father, Tim Kelly, is pastor. Investigators said that Moses Zambrana was showing his gun in a small closet to another church member interested in buying a firearm. The St. Petersburg Times reports that the other church member, Dustin Bueller, was Hannah Kelly's fiancé. Zambrana reportedly removed the magazine from the Ruger 9mm weapon, but did not know that a round was still in the chamber. The gun went off, firing a bullet through the wall. Kelly was struck in the head. The sheriff's office say detectives are still investigating the shooting. No charges have been filed. So again, this is a sad story about a negligent discharge where not only did the guy have a negligent discharge, but he managed to hit his daughter in the head while showing his gun to her fiance. So this is just a really sad story. But it's worth pounding that rule into your head. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Know your target and what is beyond. Always treat firearms as though they are loaded. Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to destroy. So, those four rules are there for a reason, and it's really sad that this had to happen. And again, just a really sad story. All right, for the last piece of news in this week's news segment, I have something from 10WALB, and it is entitled "Gun Laws Changing." It goes on to say, Albany, Georgia. Some state lawmakers want to make it legal to carry a gun into schools, even inside the state capitol. That's just one part of a list of measures easing gun restrictions that the National Rifle Association is pushing in Atlanta. Schools, the capitol, polling places, and bars. You could take guns into all of those places under this bill. But gun advocates are asking for much more than that. It might seem strange to allow concealed weapons to be carried in government buildings like the Capitol, but that is what legislators are considering. Law enforcement officials, a lot of elected officials, a lot of appointed officials already carry firearms into government buildings. We are probably trying to get some parity between citizens and people who are appointed or elected. Stephen Drew of Georgia Loan and Gun says, if House Bill 981 is passed, concealed weapons could be carried in schools, polling places, state government buildings, bars, and other venues. Drew has been affiliated with the NRA for over 30 years. He says the Constitution should give him the same rights as officials. If the law enforcement officials and the judges feel like it is a good idea for them to carry a gun... Okay, that sentence is just weird, but at any rate, the next sentence picks up to say, what constitutional right do they have greater than I have to protect myself at a venue that they forced me to be at? Bills being considered by the General Assembly would also legalize hunting with silencers, prevent state agencies from regulating gun shows, stop law enforcement from disarming someone in a state of an emergency, and more. It's kind of a laundry list or wish list for pro-firearms legislation. It appears to be where you would ask for everything and settle for something less. I don't think it is possible for all of those things to pass the legislature. As far as concealed weapons, Drew says the process of acquiring a concealed firearms license is so stringent that criminals would not tend to get through it. I think the statistics are at about 98% of concealed carry holders in Georgia have never involved in any kind of criminal activity with a firearm. He says that much of the bill would streamline the wording of gun laws and pull back on over-regulation. The part of the bill dealing with firearms in a state of emergency stems from Hurricane Katrina, when contracted officials responded when federal aid was delayed. The primary gun bill would also make it tougher to file lawsuits against gun makers. So I was tripping all over that article. I read it about 3 times off camera because it just seemed so choppy and made absolutely no sense. It was almost, some of these sentences almost seemed as though like a news clip was fed into a voice-to-text system, and this is what it spit out. But reading through this, I started to wonder, law enforcement officials, a lot of elected officials, and a lot of appointed officials already carry firearms into government buildings and other places where your typical citizen cannot, although all of these elected officials are also citizens. So that kind of irks me a little bit. But it makes me wonder, does the law say that only people that aren't elected and do not hold any government position are the ones that are banned from carrying firearms in these places? Or does the law say that no firearms are permitted, and then we'll just look away when X, Y, and Z carry a gun into this place, that place, or the other? Which kind of irks me too. And the way this article is worded makes me wonder if the facts are straight on this. So it's kind of interesting and aggravating at the same time to read this and see that there is a line drawn, and the people on this side are expected to not carry a gun into these facilities, and the people on this side can do whatever the hell they want, more or less. So I don't know, kind of irked me a little bit when I read it, and that's why I set it aside to talk about in the news piece this week. And there's also some video involved, which I will embed into the show notes, so if you want to check that out, feel free to do so. Alright, first up on the featured content log in this week's episode is a continuation of the popular Washington Times series on Emily Miller Gets Her Gun. And if you've been following along with it, Emily got her gun. She bought a SIG, I don't remember what model it was, but she was able to get the gun. She has it in her possession, and it's registered with Washington, D.C. And in a continuation of the piece, she talks about traveling with her gun. So after she gets her gun, she decides, okay, I want to take my gun out and I want to shoot it at a firing range. However, there are no ranges in Washington, D.C. So how do I go about doing this? Well, she gets in touch with the local police department, or the person that was involved with her firearm somewhere along the lines. I don't know whether he received it or he transferred it or something. Somehow he was involved. So she calls him up and she starts talking to him about the process of traveling with a firearm in Washington, D.C. And basically he says that, well, you can't take it on mass transit. You have to drive it to the range, and there are very strict restrictions. You have to be going from one place to the other, no stops in between. So basically, get in your car, drive to the range, don't stop anywhere in between, and then once you get to the range, after you're done shooting, you must drive from the range back to your place of residence, no stops in between. And Emily questions him, well, what if I run out of gas? Well, don't run out of gas. Make sure you have plenty to get from wherever you're going, from wherever you're at to the range. No exceptions. And she says, well, what if I run out of gas or I break down on the side of the road? Doesn't matter. The law says from your home to the range. No exceptions. If you need gas or you need to use the bathroom or something, hope that you don't get stopped and questioned about the firearm in your vehicle, because I guess at that point you're a felon for transporting a firearm. So she starts analyzing the whole system and says, well, there are no guns in Washington, D.C., so mass transit is out. In order to own a gun in D.C., not only do you have to jump through all these legal hoops, but you also have to own a vehicle if you ever intend on using it, because you have to drive to Virginia, or you have to drive to another state with a range, or that have shooting ranges. So, she talks about how difficult it is and things like that, and the article is fairly substantial. And the whole thing that I thought was kind of interesting is we have the same law in Pennsylvania. Here in Pennsylvania, you must go from your place of residence to the range with no stops in between. You're also permitted to go from your place of residence to another place of residence. So if you're staying at a hotel or something like that, you're permitted to transfer your gun from one place to another. However, there are no stops involved. If you stop, you're committing a crime. And in order to alleviate that in Pennsylvania, it's easy enough. You just go get your license to carry firearms, spend $35 or whatever it is, and you get a license for 5 years. But in DC, it's much more involved than that. If you want to be able to stop along the way, well, you can't in DC because there's no license. But I thought it was pretty interesting. And comparing it to what we have here in Pennsylvania, it seems practically identical. Although we don't have, those big giant legal hoops to jump through. We're a shall issue state, whereas DC is certainly not. So if you're interested in hearing about Emily's issue on transporting a gun through Washington, D.C., head over to the Washington Times website and check it out. Next up in the featured content list this week is a post from Weer'd Beard over on Weird World. And what inspired this post was an anti-gun Twitter user, Everygun, who has a talking point or says something along the lines of, some gunners advocate abolishing current firearm laws because criminals evade them. Based on this logic, any law broken should be repealed. And Weer'd Beard goes through and starts punching holes in this argument, and he does so in a variety of ways. He talks about typical criminal behavior and how guns are obtained and what they're used for and things like that. And then he starts taking a look at Virginia's repeal of the one gun a month law, for instance, where, you know, the anti-gun community's thought process is, well, now you've just opened up a huge market for gun trafficking. You know, you're going to have these criminals flooding into gun stores to purchase multiple firearms. And if the criminals aren't doing it, which they're criminals, if they have a criminal record, they're not going to be able to buy them anyway. So I guess the argument turns into, well, you know, now these straw purchasers can go in, these people with pristine criminal records can go in and purchase multiple firearms and start trafficking them. You're going to see an increase in gun crime, and you know, guns are going to make their way out of state, and all these other people are going to get hurt or killed, or these firearms are going to be used in a crime. And the whole that whole thought process just seems absurd to me. For one, before this was repealed, or before it will be repealed, there was a way to get around it. If you had a license to carry, or a carry permit, I'm not quite sure what Virginia has, you were not subject to this one gun a month law. You could purchase as many as you want because you've already gone through a background check, and you know, as far as the state's concerned, you're good to go. You can buy as many as you want. So, you know, if the straw purchaser had a pristine criminal record to begin with, and he was in the market for gun trafficking, why would he not just, or he or she not just obtain a carry permit and be able to purchase whatever they want? Seems to make sense, right? So what really did this one gun a month law do, except for create a hurdle for, you know, these innocent individuals with no criminal record that simply want to purchase more than one firearm in a given month in Virginia? You know, it only became a problem or a burden for them. The criminal element, well, you know, they're not buying guns anyway. At least they're not going through legal means to purchase firearms. So, you know, he talks about that a little bit, and you know, he talks about carry laws and how criminals are carrying guns illegally to begin with, and they're carrying guns for the purpose of committing crimes, which is also illegal. So you know, even if they were to get a carry permit, they're still committing a crime, and you know, they're still subject to imprisonment and things like that. So he just goes through the list one by one, poking holes in this absurd argument that you know, oh, well, you know, these pro-gun people, all they want to do is just repeal all these laws that criminals aren't following anyway. Isn't that kind of the point? If the criminals aren't, you know, if these laws aren't a hindrance to criminals, what good are they, aside from becoming a burden to those that are trying to take the legal channels to purchase firearms? And I don't know, maybe I just have a flawed logic about the whole thing. You know, just because you have a list of rules over here doesn't mean that the people over here that are criminals are going to abide by those laws. I mean, they're criminals after all. They're obtaining firearms to commit illegal acts, rob, maim, kill. You know, there's just a laundry list of crimes that they're going to be committing with these guns in the first place. So, you know, what good is just a set of rules over here that really doesn't hinder them anyway? I mean, there's a black market for this stuff. It's not like, you know, there's an abundance of straw purchasers with pristine criminal records. And even if there were, in the event that they get caught, they're committing a crime, and they're being punished by, or they're going to be punished by jail time. So I thought this was a pretty good article, or a pretty good blog post, you know, poking holes in this logic, in this flawed logic of every gun, and it's well worth the read. So head over to Weird World and check it out. All right, well, the last piece of featured content this week comes from Officer Smith, an anonymous name, and the blog that this comes from is Officer Smith, Thoughts from Behind the Badge. He is blogging as an anonymous police officer in California, And the blog post is entitled "Help Police." And he goes on to say, I'm only going to read a portion of it. "I'm going to say something here that is going to raise some hackles. Then I'm going to explain my statements and hopefully make everyone buy it." He goes on to say, "Buy a gun, get a bat, own some weapon, and have enough skill to use it to save your own life and the lives of your family. Do not rely on the police to save your life for you." And then he goes on to explain his stance. And, he goes on to say that, just for argument's sake, let's just say someone kicks in your door. And, they're intent on harming you or your family. You're able to get to a phone, you call 911, and you start talking to a dispatcher. You explain the situation, you tell them where you're at, and they get all the information that they need to send the police to your home or wherever you're at. He says, maybe that takes 2 minutes. If you're calling from a landline and you don't need to be redirected through a mobile call center, from a cell phone or something like that. So you're already in 2 minutes, roughly, or assume a good guesstimate is 2 minutes. He's saying. By the time that the dispatcher relays the information to the police in the area, there's probably another minute. So you're already 3 minutes in. The police officer has just received your information and they are en route. In a town X number of square miles covered by X number of police, which is like under 5 or something, he says. You're looking at a response time of a really good response time of maybe 3 minutes. If they're busy and they're on the other side of town, maybe they get there in 6 minutes. And he goes on to break this down. By the time the police officer, even by the time the police officer gets the information, that 3 minutes before the police have been dispatched is just a lifetime between you or your family and an attacker, and anything could happen. You'd be killed, hurt, bludgeoned. Just any number of things could happen in that window. And then when you take the time and you take the response time into account, it's incredible the damage that can happen to you or your family in the event that someone is intent on doing you harm. So it's a really good read, and he starts breaking it down, using guesstimates, this many minutes, by the time this happens, this much time is elapsed, and then by the time this happens, this much time is elapsed. And in the end, he says, police officers usually get there after the crime has been committed, even on a good day when response time has been fantastic and everything has been streamlined. They're still getting there after the fact. They're more or less doing cleanup. They're assessing the situation and just straightening things out. They're not there to they're not your knight in shining armor showing up in time to prevent anything from happening. So he stresses the fact that you should be prepared to protect yourself and not simply rely on the police to do it for you. And coming from a police officer, I thought that this whole article was just very refreshing, especially coming out of California. So, well worth the read. I actually subscribed to this blog and can't wait to read some more from it because I thought this was really insightful and just really good stuff. So head over to Officer Smith Thoughts from Behind the Badge and check it out. Well, for the cigar and drink pairing this week, I have a kind of an amusing little story on the beverage. I'm back to coffee, and the other week we were running low on Dunkin' Donuts coffee. I'm a big fan of it. My wife's a big fan of it. I'm simply amazed that a nationwide chain that churns out just an abundance of coffee and donuts can mass produce such great coffee. I just love this stuff. So we have Dunkin' Donuts, we're drinking through it, and we start running low. So my wife goes grocery shopping one day, and she goes looking for Dunkin' Donuts. The grocery store's all out, so she picks up this other stuff and brings it home. She fills the Keurig carousel that we have, and I go to make coffee one day, and I look, and I see this donut shop coffee. And I turn to her, and I start telling her, like, what is this? What is this donut shop? What is this, some kind of cheap knockoff Dunkin' Donuts stuff? I don't want to drink this swill. And she starts laughing. She says, you try it. It's good. I'm thinking, you're crazy. I'm really skeptical. I want to stick to the Dunkin' Donuts. So I finish off the Dunkin' Donuts stuff, and then I grab the donut shop canister one day, I pop it into the Keurig machine, and I give it a shot, not expecting much of anything. The machine makes the coffee, I put it in my cup, and I come down here and I have a cigar one day, and I start sipping on the coffee, and I'm really, really impressed. I kind of had to eat my words calling it swill, because it wound up being really, really good. In fact, it was so good that when we were running low, I grabbed a canister and tucked it away in my office, so that when we do, or when I was doing this podcast, I would have one canister left, because I knew we would be long gone by the time the podcast rolled around. And my wife got all upset at me because I hid one little canister, and she really likes it too, and we ended up with like Folgers or something to hold us over until she went grocery shopping again. But this stuff is really, really good. I'm surprised at how great it is. It's really rich. It doesn't have that dirty sort of a taste that you get from cheap coffee. It's something that I taste a lot in like Folgers and Maxwell House, typical, mass-produced grocery store stuff. It always tastes dirty to me, and this stuff it just tastes really clean and really fresh and rich, and I was really happy with it. So that's what I'm drinking, or that's what I'm pairing with my cigar. The cigar is the Emilio AF1, and I picked up a 5-pack of these from Mike over at Buckhead the other week when I ordered a box of the Ortega Series D, and I've been smoking through them, and I've always liked these cigars. I had handful of them when I went to the Delaware Cigar Festival, where Emilio is headquartered. They're in Delaware, and I really enjoyed them. I had a couple of them before then. I had some more at the Delaware Cigar Festival, really enjoyed them, and when they became available at Buckhead, because prior to that they were only available in the stores that Gary owned in his Emilio chain, and if you wanted them, you had to go to Delaware and buy them. He didn't ship or anything like that. So once they opened up and were available from Buckhead, I was really eager to get my hands on some. The ones that I had before were really good. Flavor-wise, these things are great. They're really rich. They have a nice dark Maduro flavor. They burn well. They produce lots of dense smoke. They coat the palate really well. They're nice and creamy. They go wonderfully with coffee. But the only problem that I'm having with these things is they are hideous. The first one had a patch in it about the size of my thumb. Fortunately, it was done correctly. There are a couple of ways that cigar manufacturers do patches. If there's a flaw in the wrapper, like a hole or something, a lot of times you'll see a manufacturer take a plug of tobacco, slap some vegetable-based glue on it, and stick it right to the cigar. When it's on the outside, for one, it's very, very apparent, and sometimes as the cigar burns shorter, the heat starts to soften the glue, and the patch will sometimes lift, sometimes fall completely off, but it's just very visually unappealing. These, on the other hand, were put on the underside of the leaf. So when the leaf was spread out and stretched, the patch was placed on the underside of it, and then the cigar was rolled. They're less apparent, however, when it's the size of your thumbprint. It's pretty easy to tell. This one also had a patch on it closer to the foot, however, it was much smaller. In both cases, it didn't affect the way the cigar smoked, and it just wasn't an issue. It was just kind of ugly. Another cigar out of the batch had a pretty big vein on the outside of the bunch. It was like right under the wrapper leaf, or right under the binder. So the cigar looked like it had a growth or something in it. It wasn't round anymore, and it protruded pretty far. Again, cigar burned properly, smoked really well, but it was hideous. What's that put us at? 3. The other 2 looked and smoked really well. Fortunately, even with those visual defects, the cigars smoke great, they taste great, and I'm just really happy to have my hands on some. The ugliness makes me a little hesitant to spend $7.10 a piece for the cigars. I wish they looked a little better, but I still think they deliver lots and lots of flavor. And of the Emilio cigars, there's an AF1, AF2, and Grimalkin. My favorite is the AF1. I'll definitely be buying more. I just hope they show up looking a little better. So if you're interested in trying the Emilio AF1, I would suggest getting in touch with my preferred retailer, which is Buckhead Cigar down in Atlanta, Georgia. You can pick up the phone and give them a call at 404-844-0400. If you're interested in looking up pricing, which includes the Emilio line, you can look at askthecigarguys.com. I don't remember what the pricing is on these, but I remember seeing it listed as well as the other Emilio lines. Mike is also on Twitter as @BuckheadCigar. He's also on Facebook and Google Plus as Buckhead Cigar. So, if you're interested in trying this cigar, reach out and get in touch with my preferred retailer. Not only will you be supporting a cigar guy, but Mike is also a gun guy as well. Well, at the beginning of the podcast, I made mention that I had a listener send me a write-up on New York gun laws. And I was originally going to talk about that write-up and New York gun laws in the podcast. However, because I went to a stage design seminar today for USPSA, I thought I would talk about that instead and push the New York gun law talk until next week because the USPSA stuff was fresh on my mind. As I said in the past, I don't want to talk too much about competitive shooting and things like that. However, I enjoyed this seminar and I spent a great deal of time preparing for it, so I thought it was well worth incorporating it into the podcast. So, to start things off, I've been designing USPSA stages since my last match in, I don't know, late December or something like that. It was a way for me to kind of keep in USPSA shape while the Pennsylvania winter set in. And it was sort of a way for me to analyze stages and well, for one, come up with my own stages, and two, to break them down to sort of stay in USPSA shape. And I really enjoyed doing it. I was creating stages. They're on my blog if you're interested in downloading them, looking at them, using them in your club, whatever, free of charge, have at it. The only thing I ask is if you use them, shoot me an email and let me know how it worked out for you. You know, if you had any problems with setting them up, if you ran into an issue with the stage design. Again, the blog is waltandpa.com. You know, just to let me know so that I can keep those things in mind going into future designs. So, I've been posting these stages on my blog, and I thought, you know, it'd be kind of interesting to start submitting them to local clubs. Maybe I can see them set up and see them run, and, you know, I'd love to be able to shoot my own stages. So I started sending them to a couple of the local clubs, and I've been getting pretty good responses from them. One of the clubs that I sent the first stage design to was looking for volunteers to help with stage design, and in order to help me help them, they offered a space in a stage design seminar that they were running. Basically, it was just an informal meeting with volunteers to go over the concept of stage design, some typical problems that you see in a lot of stages, how to avoid them, and how to gear stages for this particular club. So I decided to take him up on the offer. I told him I'd be there, and the stage design seminar was this morning. So leading into this, I was under the impression that the club was in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Someone had mentioned that it was near French Creek Outfitters. I've purchased a couple of guns from them, and I'm familiar with the area. So I'm expecting like a 45-minute car ride. You know, it's not a voyage, but you know, it's pretty lengthy when gas is $4 a gallon. So this morning I sit down and I quick look up the club so that I can punch the address into my GPS, and I find out that the club is nowhere near where I thought it was. It's in Kennett Square, which is an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes away. So already I'm kind of down in the dumps about driving all the way out there, spending 2.5 hours in the car there and back, and now I'm second guessing whether or not I want to volunteer because it's just a long ride in the car, and it's also going to involve me not only volunteering my time in designing stages, but also in helping the club set up. So that means I need to leave the house earlier, and I'll wind up staying a little bit later. So it's just a really big time investment. But because I said I was going to go, I got in the car and I drove down there. And I met up with two other guys that were volunteering their time as well. One guy I've shot with before at Lower Providence, and he offered me some tips here and there, so it was nice seeing a friendly face or a familiar face. And another guy I'd never met before, who also shot at Lower Providence. I guess I was never squatted with him. So we started going through the stage design seminar, which was basically really informal. We walked through all of the pistol pits, and we talked about how stages are set up in these particular pits, the the safety precautions that the club takes in order to maintain safety for all the shooters, and some of the things that they do and how they don't want us to run into potential DQ traps or 180 traps or things like that, or RO traps, things like that. And, you know, the interesting thing about this whole thing is that I am not a range officer. I haven't gone through the NRIO certification course or anything like that. There's not one available in my area, and for one, I don't want to go to Jersey anyway. And two, the closest one was in New Jersey, which was like 2+ hours away. And it was a 2-day seminar, so it was either 2 hours there, 2 hours back, then the following day 2 hours there, 2 hours there, 2 hours back, or spend the night, hotel fees, things like that. So I opted not to go, and I was the only person in the group that wasn't a range officer, which I thought was going to become a little bit of an issue, but it actually, there was a little zinger in there later on that I thought was pretty good. So we start talking about the different pistol pits and things that we can do to create challenging stages, and we talked a bit about what the club likes to do with a mixture of speed shoots and things, and long field courses, and what typically goes where, you know, as far as the pistol pits are concerned. And it was really educational. Leading up to this, I've been kind of living in an ideal world. When I design stages, everything is flat, level, you know, everything is just perfect. You know, it's just big, expansive space. And, you know, when we get to the pistol pit, we're seeing, or when we get to the club, you know, we're seeing elevations change. Some of the pistol pits have little ramps at the ends. You know, obviously they're not level. You know, there's high spots, there's low spots, there's, you know, it's, the club is on a rather rocky area, so you need to, you know, you can't have targets in this portion of the pit because there's potential for bouncing rounds and ricochets over the berm, and some of the berms are low in spots, and, you know, some of the berms have holes in them that you can potentially get a skip out of. So it was really good seeing that. Excuse me, I don't know what I'm going to do to design around that stuff. I'm going to try to see if I can get the club on Google Earth or Google Maps and take a satellite picture of it and trace over it and see if I can scale it properly so that I can get, you know, proper dimensions and a perfect layout for where I can start dropping targets. But toward the end of the seminar, as we're walking back and getting ready to get into our cars and leave, one of the guys says, well, you know, you asked us to redesign the stage and you didn't collect them. Do you want mine? And the guy running the seminar says, yeah, sure, you know, I'll take it. And he starts looking at it, and he starts picking out problems with the one stage and, you know, talking about things that he liked. And then once he was finished with the one guy, I handed him my paperwork, and I was like, well, here's the one that I redesigned. And, you know, he starts looking at it, and it's, you know, there's a lot of chin scratching going on, and, you know, he says, you know, here's a minor issue that may pop up where I had a low wall where targets could be engaged from a hard angle, but he's saying, you know, this really shouldn't be an issue because of the way it's set up, so that shouldn't be an issue, but I really like the way you're utilizing walls and angles here. And he seemed genuinely impressed with it. The little bit of a zinger there was the one guy that handed him the paperwork first is a CRO, which is a step above a range officer. And he sort of chuckles a little bit, and he goes, yeah, Walt's not even a range officer, and look at the stuff that he's coming up with. And he sort of just kind of walked away with a smile on his face, and it made me feel really good that I was getting praise, and I didn't even go through the range officer course. So that's really good. I want to take the RO course at some point in time, but my hands are kind of tied until it comes to a local club. So, you know, I've got a bit more homework to do. He's giving us some more stages to redesign. We're supposed to do a collaborative effort to create a stage, which presents a minor issue for me. USPSA typically uses a PowerPoint template or a Microsoft Word template to design their stages. And basically, it's just a document with props on it. And for these stages that we're redesigning, we're supposed to use everything that's there. So, you know, if there's 3 walls and 10 targets and 3 pieces of steel, that's all we have to work with. And it's just a matter of clicking and dragging the stuff around. But my issue is that I hate it. I hate the PowerPoint template, and I have absolutely no interest in using this thing. because it's just so primitive. I hate the thought of using this PowerPoint template, and I kind of have to use it so that we can do this collaboratively. And I say I hate it because I really do, and the reason that I do is because I'm a draftsman by trade. I use a piece of software that costs, I don't know, I think the licenses now are something like $2,500, and I have the software through work. I have a home license to use the software at home, and because it's so powerful and allows me to create three-dimensional stages with multiple views and things like that, I went to use the more powerful software. It allows me to troubleshoot where you can't with the PowerPoint template. So for instance, the PowerPoint props are roughly 1/8 inch scale, but you're working with a piece of paper that is 8.5 by 11. If you have a 15-yard pit, the paper doesn't scale to match 15 yards. If it's 75 yards, it doesn't scale. So your props are to scale, your environment is not. And basically you're moving these things around and dropping them on a piece of paper, and you're coming up with a rough sketch at best for a given stage. When it's time to set up that stage, that's where all your troubleshooting is. Just because you have a wall on this portion of your stage on your PowerPoint template doesn't mean that's where the wall is going to go, because there is some tweaking involved. You know, maybe the wall needs to be shifted this way and other targets need to be shifted around. You know, all of the troubleshooting is done live at the match on the day of setup. In my system, I'm doing all the troubleshooting in the 3D environment. I'm drawing everything to scale. Props, walls, the entire environment is to scale. So when I say that this 8-foot wall, this 8-foot long wall is 25 feet from the rear line, it's 25 feet from the rear line. And when I say, you know, there's a target 4 feet to the left and 16 feet behind the wall, that's where it goes. Now, I'm not just saying all this because, you know, bad boy stage designer kind of a thing. I'm saying it because it allows me to troubleshoot in the 3D environment. I can drop lines, I can inject a camera into the environment, and literally move the camera around. So if I stick the camera in there and tell it, your view is from 5 feet off the ground, which is, I'm assuming, is typical for the average person. The gun will probably be about 5 feet off the ground. I can then tell the camera, okay, here's your target. We're going to be looking at this target, and then I can take the camera and drag it around. I can see where the props start to shroud the target. I can see where the target is viewable from multiple points on the course of fire. And it allows me to do a lot of the it takes a lot of the guesswork out of stage design. So it's really, really hard for me to step away from troubleshooting and taking on a 3D environment and going back to this primitive drag stuff around in a PowerPoint template system. So that's going to be a bit of a hurdle. I guess I'm going to have to do it if I want to continue doing volunteer work for this particular club, but I want my stages to be done in this 3D environment so that I can troubleshoot. Then, you know, that's the fun of stage design for me, is being able to move around in the virtual environment and determine where targets should go and how they are to be engaged, and, you know, where the problems lie and things like that. So it's going to be tough, but, you know, I guess I'm just going to have to see what I can do with the PowerPoint template. In the event that we're taken off this sort of collaborative effort, and we sort of work our way up to individually designing stages, I think I'm going to revert right back to the AutoCAD system where I can troubleshoot and sort of get everything out of the way. In addition to the stage description, I'm also generating a plan view with all the dimensions on it. So theoretically, when we get to the range, bring a tape measure and we should be able to set this thing up pretty quick. In theory, you know, I haven't actually done it, but in theory, my system should work really, really well. Unfortunately, not everyone has this $2,500 piece of software and knows how to use it. So that's kind of where I'm at with the stage design thing and moving forward. USPSA matches start next month, and I can't wait. It'll probably slow me down a little bit in churning out stage designs. I've been doing about one a week, but I can't wait to get back into the shooting season. I hope I'm not like heaping on the USPSA and competitive shooting talk and boring you to death if you're not into it, but I really am into it, and I wanted to talk about it in this episode. So there is your discussion topic for episode 30. Well, it's about time to close out the show, but before I let you get out of here, I want to thank you for watching or listening to episode 30 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltInPA.com. I love getting emails, so if you're interested in sending me one, you can use the contact form on my blog at WaltInPA.com, or you can send me an email at walt@waltinpa.com. I'm also on Twitter as @WaltW, Facebook and Google Plus as Walt White, and my blog has a Facebook page, which is Walt in PA. You have to search for it in the Facebook search box. Once you find it, do me a favor and click like. I'm trying to bolster that number and get it up over 100. I've been sitting at 80 something for a couple of weeks now, but I'd really appreciate it if you like the page. It would, I don't know, it would make my day. So please go ahead and do that. I guess that's about it. I really don't know what else to say to close it out. So, again, thank you for watching episode 30 of Shooting the Breeze, and until next time, take it easy.
You can hear Gun Rights Radio Network on Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher allows you to listen to your favorite shows directly from your iPhone, Android phone, BlackBerry, or Palm phones, on demand and on the go. Don't have Stitcher? Download it for free today at Stitcher.com or in the app stores. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Gun Rights Radio Network shows can be found under Sources.